The public is conditioned to look skyward. Defense contractors celebrate new contracts for missile defense systems, source number 4, and the media amplifies the spectacle of kinetic threats. This is intentional misdirection. The missile is a weapon of noise. Its strategic utility is declining inverse to its cost. The true vector of systemic collapse is not the roar of an engine, but absolute engineered silence. The real battle space is the ocean floor and low Earth orbit. The critical national infrastructure is not steel and concrete, but terabytes per second, flowing through a handful of undersea fiber optic cables. This is the nervous system of global finance and military command. RIA-SI documents confirm the asymmetric leverage. Severing these data arteries or blinding satellite constellations requires a fraction of the force needed for conventional warfare, yet achieves total strategic paralysis. This is the blueprint for creating a blind Leviathan. A nation-state, stripped of its data feed, does not simply power down. It becomes a trapped organism. Its financial markets cannot clear transactions. Its military assets cannot receive targeting data. It is immensely powerful, but functionally blind, deaf, and isolated. It loses the capacity for choice. In this state of induced paralysis, its response protocol shifts from strategy to mathematical necessity. With its economic solvency already compromised, source number 2, it cannot absorb the shock or mount a sustained conventional response. Confronted with simultaneous threats or deter, source ARD or 3, even a minor regional flare-up, source or RACO 1, becomes an existential trigger. The blind Leviathan, unable to see the target, is forced to default to its only remaining option, high-yield, pre-programmed, asymmetric escalation. The silent vector is the prelude to the terminal event. The primary vector for systemic failure is not external attack, but internal decay. A state's core protocol is maintaining its own solvency. Sustained, symmetrical warfare is the single most expensive kinetic expenditure a nation can undertake. When the cost of projecting power abroad exceeds the capacity to maintain stability at home, a fatal paradox emerges. The mechanism begins domestically. Forbes reports on a real affordability crisis. Source number 2, a condition where citizen-level economic viability is eroding. A nation is a macro expression of its population. A populace facing a solvency crisis cannot underwrite an indefinite, high-cost foreign conflict. This domestic liability becomes a strategic liability. This financial pressure forces a brutal calculus, particularly with unpopular campaigns. Analysts at CSIS document how protracted conflicts become a severe domestic liability, draining both treasury reserves and political capital. The war itself becomes a vector for internal collapse, accelerating the solvency crisis far faster than enemy action. At this inflection point, the system is forced to pivot. The kinetic cost of symmetrical engagement is no longer sustainable. The response protocol shifts from strategic choice to mathematical necessity. Asymmetric escalation. The objective is to substitute overwhelming financial and industrial output with high-leverage technological force, achieving a decisive result before the state defaults. This is not a sign of strength. It is the last available option for a system facing a terminal solvency crisis. The core of the strategic shift is not ideological. It is a balance sheet entry. According to analysts at RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, the kinetic cost has been inverted. A state invests $5 million in a main battle tank. The opposing force invests $500 in a first-person view drone. The math does not allow for a sustainable defense. This is not warfare. It is the scheduled liquidation of sovereign assets at a loss ratio of $10,000 to 1. This economic imbalance enables a protocol known as the democratization of violence. The monopoly on deploying decisive kinetic force is broken. It no longer requires a nation-state's treasury. It requires a credit card. When a nation's domestic solvency is already in crisis, absorbing these asymmetric losses becomes a mathematical impossibility. The system cannot tolerate the bleed rate. Therefore, the response protocol must shift. Faced with a strategic simultaneity conundrum, multiple threats it cannot afford to fight conventionally, a power defaults to asymmetric escalation. It cannot win a war of attrition, so it must leverage high-technology force multipliers, such as advanced missile defense and guidance systems, to achieve a rapid, decisive outcome. The domestic affordability crisis becomes the direct accelerant for a global launch-on-warning posture. This is not a choice. It is a feature of systemic decay. The public is directed to focus on the geographic location of a flare-up, such as the Middle East tensions noted by the Philippines. This is a critical error in analysis. According to CSIS doctrine, these regions are not the cause of systemic risk. They are selected proxy laboratories. They are gray zones, deliberately chosen as staging grounds for a conflict that has already been predetermined by economic factors. The selection of these laboratories is not random, it is a function of cost. As a nation's domestic economic solvency evaporates, a state of real affordability crisis documented by Forbes, the kinetic cost of sustained, symmetrical engagement becomes mathematically prohibitive. The state must find a venue where it can apply maximum leverage with minimum direct liability. These gray zones serve as the test bed for the strategic simultaneity conundrum, a blueprint for overwhelming a target with multiple synchronized threats. More critically, they are the deployment arenas for the technological force required for asymmetric escalation. Contracts with entities like MDA Space are not merely defensive. They are investments in the high-leverage tools, the precise technological accelerants needed to achieve a rapid, decisive outcome from a distance. Therefore, observing instability in a region is like watching the needle on a pressure gauge. It indicates stress, but it is not the boiler. The boiler is the domestic balance sheet. The gray zone is simply the designated vent where the systemic pressure, amplified by insolvency, will be released in a controlled, kinetic event. The protocol is locked. The venue is merely a variable. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a choice. It is a mathematical protocol triggered by fear. Its logic is absolute. Retaliate upon detection of an incoming attack before your own assets are liquidated. The entire system is dependent on a constant, trusted flow of data from high-leverage technological assets, such as those provided by MDA Space to the U.S. Missile Defense Agency, source number 4. The doctrine assumes the eyes and ears are infallible. This is where the fog of digital war becomes a systemic accelerant. A hostile cyber attack does not need to launch a physical missile. It only needs to blind the radar. When the screens go dark, the commander faces a zero-sum calculation. Is this a system error, or is it a decapitation strike already in motion? The window to make that distinction is measured in minutes. According to CSIS analysis, in this state of induced blindness, the protocol defaults to the worst-case scenario. The commander is now forced to launch based on the absence of information. With domestic economic solvency in crisis, source number 2, and a nation already stretched thin by the strategic simultaneity conundrum, source number 3, there is no buffer. The capacity to absorb a first strike and deliberate a response does not exist. It's too expensive. The fear of paralysis becomes the trigger. The doctrine, designed to ensure survival, transforms into an automated doomsday engine. A minor regional flare-up, like the tensions between Israel and Iran, source number 1, provides the perfect context for an adversary to deploy such a cyber attack. The engineered weakness in the digital domain forces a kinetic response that the nation can no longer afford to win, but mathematically cannot afford not to initiate. The final variable is timing. The thesis dictates that as domestic economic solvency, source number 2, approaches 0, the probability of asymmetric escalation approaches 1. Given the increasing frequency of regional flare-ups, source number 1, and the documented reality of the strategic simultaneity conundrum, source number 3, the system requires testing. Therefore, the forecast is not for a kinetic event, but a calibration shot. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a 48 to 72-hour paralysis of a major automated port terminal or a Tier 1 cloud data center cluster. CSIS reports confirm state actors possess the capability for such a strike. This will be an attribution impossible event, publicly blamed on a novel cyber-physical exploit. Its purpose is not destruction, but data collection, to measure the precise velocity of the ensuing economic shockwave and to confirm the West's response is limited by its evaporating capacity for sustained conflict. It is a non-kinetic demonstration of the high-leverage technological force, source number 4, that becomes the default protocol when conventional options are no longer affordable. It is the final warning shot before a launch-on-warning posture becomes mathematical certainty.